Welcome back, everyone. And I would like now to introduce you to Amara Goel, who had agreed to moderate today's discussion. Amara and I knew each other for many years. We've been friends, close friends, and as colleagues. I know she's not only loves to perform, but also she is a scholar of international policy and cultural relations. Amara grew up in Texas at Austin, and she has performed in many places like in Paris, Cambodia, New York, Los Angeles, and Houston. She completed an internship at the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland, facilitating international cultural diplomacy. So please help me to welcome my good friend, Amara.
Thank you so much, Arn, for such a kind introduction. It's really my pleasure and honor to have the opportunity to help host this discussion today. Bangsokol offered an immersive experience to a diverse intergenerational audience in each of the 5 cities where it was produced, in Melbourne, Boston, New York, Paris, and Phnom Penh between 2017 and 2019, engaging diverse international audiences and local communities and the Cambodian diaspora. It struck a different chord in all of us. And today we have 4 amazing guests who have a deep connection to Cambodia and who experienced Bangsokol in various cities. So please help me welcome Ada Khun, who joins us from New York City. Ada is a 2nd-generation Cambodian American who works in the finance sector. She's passionate about diversity and advancing the role of women in finance. Hi, Ada.
Hi.
We also have Sopheap Chea, who joins us from Phnom Penh. Sopheap is a historian and executive director of Lopana Audiovisual Center. He has particular interest in the role of arts in telling stories about society. So please help me welcome Sopheap.
Thank you for having me with you today.
We also have Emily Howe, who joins us from Boston. Emily is an ethnomusicologist, a music educator and conductor who sees music as a means for catalyzing social change. So welcome, Emily. And we also have, last but not least, Seda Douglas, who joins us from Melbourne, Australia. Seda is a key community leader in Melbourne. She's a journalist, a broadcaster, an executive producer of ABC's Radio Australia and co-founder of Save Cambodian Children Fund Australia. So I'd like to welcome everybody and thank you so much for joining us today. Let's first start out by asking everybody to tell us which performances of Bangsokol that you experienced, and for you, what was most memorable and what feelings did it evoke for you? Who would like to start? Seda, would you like to start?
Thank you, Amara. Yes, as you all know that being a Melbourneian, I saw Bangsokol in Melbourne in 2017, and it was great. It was great to be able to see such an event in Australia. So what I could remember was the colorful costumes, the music, and also the musical instrument, also displays a lot of carvings and decoration to reflect our arts and our culture. So that was fantastic. And also to actually see the instrument that I've never seen before. When I was younger in Cambodia, I was not an art person, so I had very, very little interest, of learning our own culture and our own arts. But to see all that, it was very exciting for me, yes. The other part that I felt a bit sad or nostalgia was the video footage, reflecting the war, the destruction, the scale of destruction, the suffering of people. And that was the part that I became quite emotional because I left Cambodia after Pol Pot was toppled in 1979. So I went through the whole period of atrocity, and I lost my dad. And 5 younger siblings, so it was very hard for me. So that was the part that I felt the most. That's had a lot of impact on me and on my emotion. And the war, because when I grew up, I was growing up through, civil wars period as well as the Vietnam War, spill over to Cambodia and all that. And it turns me into a completely different person. I don't like war. I hate war. So,
Yes, that is really, really understandable that the images would evoke your memory. Yeah, and in a setting that hopefully had some segues into bringing that forward and looking to the future. So thank you for sharing that. So Ada, would you like to share with us where you saw the performances and what were most memorable things that you noticed and what kind of feelings that it brings for you?
So I saw Bangsokol in the New York premiere in New York City. It was such an amazing production from each selection of the music piece that Him Sopheap had composed. And I've always loved music, and that really struck deeply with me. And it was such a beautiful experience. But I think same like Seda, I think when I started to watch in composition with each stills, each piece that was selected, it was extremely overwhelming for me. I think it brought upon a very strong emotions because when you understand Cambodian history, you understand what it means. And I truly was taken back. I wasn't expecting to have all these bottled emotions coming out of unexpected places. Because I'm second generation, although my parents had survived the genocide. But there's a piece of it that, that you hear stories and to finally, as an adult, to understand what that pieces mean. But in addition to that, I think it was also part of the ritual of honoring all those that we had lost, but moving forward to the present, seeing how far we've come, and I think that healing is still going on. But to see it in on a full production and shown around the world, it brought a different kind of hope, I think, for my generation. And it's also this question of identity, because the Cambodia that I hear about is I think what I consider a time capsule version of what my parents in their stories had told me. But then growing up here, it's obviously a bit different than having to fully comprehend what that all means, being an Asian American and a Cambodian American. But overall, I think it was extremely grateful to have seen it and very, very proud of the work that was done.
Thank you, Ada. That totally resonates with me. Though I was born overseas on the Thai-Cambodian border, my lived experience is a second generation Cambodian American as well. And everything that you said really resonated with me. So thank you. Emily, would you like to share where you saw the show and what kinds of things do you remember and what feelings did it evoke for you?
Sure. So this is not my history and not my culture, but I feel really privileged that I've had a long journey with this piece. I was doing dissertation fieldwork, and Bangsokol was a part of what I was studying. So I traveled to Melbourne and experienced it there. And then when the piece came to the US, I kind of got involved with the community engagement piece and helped shuttle the musicians around and do some of the talkback sessions in schools and things like that, which was a lot of fun. So I got to participate in that. And then when I was doing further dissertation research in Cambodia, I had the opportunity to help prepare the children's chorus to sing in the production. So, I love this work so much. And I think Sopheap's score is so beautiful. And there are so many things I love about it and so many strong emotions that it evokes in me, even though, again, it's not my family's story. But I would say that I really fell in love with Cambodian arts in part through smote, through ritual chant. I just think it's some of the most beautiful, astounding music I've ever heard. And I love the way that Sopheap has kind of adapted that music to this format. And I can still imagine the voices of Hunsavi and Chon Samat chanting this music in performance with the instruments underneath. It's just incredibly beautiful. So it's been a privilege to be a part of this really journey along with Cambodian living arts and the musicians over the years.
Thank you so much. It's really nice to have a perspective that is not of someone with our heritage, because that's also really, really valuable. And one of the goals of Bangsokol as well is to reach this diverse audience. So thank you so much. Sopheap, would you like to share as well? Which performances did you see?
I actually attended the show of Bangsokol in 3 different locations, New York, Boston, and Phnom Penh. It's not easy to fragment the show and choose the best part of the show to mention here today, but I want to say that they are all good, narrating the contemporary history of Cambodia. I want to say the way of telling story with combination of music, film, voice, movement, ritual, performed by talented artists help me to contextualize the situation or events that Cambodian people went through during the war. So what I would say about Bangsokol is that connecting us, it mean here, including leader, policymaker, politician, to the past. Bangsokol remind us about what we are doing today at the present and projecting our futures. Yeah.
I love what you said about the timelessness of here, because that was something that I experienced as well through the show, is that we are accessing the past in order to engage the present and then nurture the future, which is something that I found really uplifting and surprising. And I totally agree with Seda and Ada as well that you know, the images are pretty captivating and can be very haunting. But I saw the show in Paris and then again in Phnom Penh last year. And I think, and my first impression in Paris was that, you know, this wasn't going to be a typical concert, that, you know, it wasn't just a musical concert. What we typically expect from a concert is just music and voice. As soon as we walked into the hall, there was photos and flowers and incense and an opportunity to offer prayers. And that was a signal to me that I was walking into an immersion experience. There was a really more of a collage of sound and visuals that was evoking like the lived experiences of my parents and grandparents. And so that was what was most memorable to me, is that this is not your typical Requiem. And it was riveting. And the timelessness, as you mentioned, was something that I deeply appreciated, because it really propelled us forward. And it wasn't something that kept us in the past, but it used the past as a vehicle to push us forward. So, you know, that definitely resonates with me. For those of us who live in the Cambodian diaspora, so mainly Ada and Seda, what did it mean to you and your community to have this show being produced in your hometowns? How did the community respond to that? What did you notice about that? Ada, would you like to start?
Sure. I think for my community, it was sort of an experience where, look at how far we've come, where this is a production produced by Cambodians. And also, I believe the community was a part of it. There's a ritual towards, I think, the opening of it, if I remember correctly. So I think it means a lot where it's making a statement saying that we're here to honor and take note of what's going on in the past. It also represents this is where we are in the present. And it also unfolds of what could the possibilities be for the future, for this country as a whole, for this generation, for future generations, and even through the art and the healing that's going to continue.
Thank you. Yeah. Seda?
The community response was very positive, as many of those people hadn't seen such an event for a long time. But for younger members of the community, they never saw performing arts as such. So there was a sense of nostalgia and also a sense of pride as well, felt by most of us, because it was such a big entourage of all ages, and they were fantastic. They were very talented and extremely confident, particularly performing in a country where their language was not spoken, and also a completely different culture and environment. So somehow they really were very entertaining, the cultural part of it. And it was a learning curve for the, Cambodian younger generation, because they were, not very close to their own cultural heritage. Let's face it this way. It doesn't matter how parents and our older generation try to, getting close to the cultural root, they more or less were inclined to adopt the new culture and the new environment. But seeing something like this make them think twice, where they from, even though they might speak English much more fluent than their own mother tongue.
Yeah, that's really powerful, Long, to have the next generation have a glimpse of what the mother country went through. So that's really wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Sopheap, for you, it was a little different, right? Because you saw the performance in Boston and New York, and then you saw it in Phnom Penh, in your home country. So what was that like, the homecoming, to see that at home? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. First of all, I am very thankful to everyone, CLA team, Bong Arn, Mok Luen, Purti, the crew Himsapi, and all for their effort, for their tireless work to bring Bangsokol back to Cambodia, its home country. I feel very honored to see it here with my Cambodian friends here. So that we were able to share our sentimental experience together here. The story was about what happened to Cambodia, and it makes sense, and it is meaningful to have Bangsokol in Cambodia for younger generations, in order for them to learn, to reflect what caused the problem, what should be avoided, and again for them, because they will be the futures and they will build the country, so that they can judge what their activity, what their action of today's for the next day, I mean for tomorrow. So from that, they can learn, they can accept the experience of their parent or what happened to their people. So they know what to do today and what they should do for tomorrow. So I feel very, very honored, more than excited, but it's honored to have this here for Cambodian here, because this Cambodian will be the future of Cambodia, will be the leader of Cambodia. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask each of you, what did you notice was the response from audience members who were non-Cambodians, and those who were unfamiliar with Cambodia or Cambodian art? And Emily, I know that you yourself are non-Cambodian, and I'll get to that later, but I wanted to see, perhaps what you noticed about people who were non-Cambodians and their experience of Bangsokol.
Those friends of mine, you know, who are Australian or non-Cambodian, some of them, so to speak. I think the reason they went to see Bangsokol in Melbourne, they have heard something about Cambodia. They either have some connection with Cambodian communities through friendship or marriages or whatsoever. They have read, they have seen some documentary, or they have studied something about Cambodia that attracted them to go and see Bangsokol. So what they have learned was the colorful culture of Cambodia's and fantastic arts being performed and displayed by art artists, and music quite unique, you know, and also, as I mentioned earlier, you know, the Khmer music instruments, you know, are very, very interesting pieces to also see. So many of them, in fact, I only knew a few when I was younger. The other part was they realized how foreign intervention, you know, foreign players get themselves into the war in Cambodia and the scale of destruction, and prompted them to read more on Cambodia, which is a good thing. You never know who they turn to be and what they turn to be in the future. If they become a big shot policy maker, they might have to think twice about sending Australian troops to the war of another country. You know, for me, you cannot use war to make peace. Being a Buddhist, you can imagine that you actually, you know, go and kill people. The aim of making war is to kill and destroy. And how can you gain peace from doing such a things? So I leave it to you guys, because I'm not here to preaching religion. Yeah, so in a way it's positive that people needed to learn more, to study more the suffering that people went through. Because those young people who were sent to war didn't realize what they were forced to do under the command of their leaders. They were very young, some of them. They think going to another part of the world to, you know, to the battlefield was fun. Well, it isn't fun when they come back in a, you know, in a box at a very young age. Plus, you don't know what they were supposed to be doing either. Killing innocent people. A lot of them are innocent children and women and men.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really, really significant that that the common story here is that the piece was a catalyst for people looking further into the history and looking further and asking more questions. That's super important. That though this story was not their own heritage, they recognized a common thread and perhaps a responsibility. So thank you for sharing that. And Ada, do you have something to add to that?
Yes, I think from my observation, the audience, foreign audience who's not Cambodian, were quite taken away with it. I think they're captivated. I mean, it was a beautiful production. But then on another side there, you can hear the conversations that are going on regarding, you know, the war, of course. When you see, I think, B-52 stills or video footage playing, and then mention of Nixon, I think it also captures, like, you know, the war, like the protests, the Vietnam War, and what continued on. And it all was such an interesting backstory, because it also, because the what happened in war isn't over when it's over, right? It carries on, and its impact and the trauma. And I think just getting, like, the insights from them, like having them see the aftermath, I think they felt very sad. And it wasn't just the war, it's also, like, you know, genocide. I think there are people who can relate, especially with the Holocaust. So I think it was an interesting perspective from what I hear.
Yeah, thank you. And Emily, as a non-Cambodian yourself, and as someone really deeply connected to Cambodia and Cambodian art, I wanted to know what value Bangsokol had for you, especially as an ethnomusicologist. I can imagine. But I also understand that you did a research project in which you interviewed diverse members of the audience. So were there any common threads that you identified, or anything new or interesting that you learned from that? If you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, okay, so I'll start with this question about the kind of value of the piece. And I think for me, I think about this piece in several different ways. First of all, I'm a choral conductor, and so when I heard that this piece was being written, I was thrilled, first of all, because I'm always excited when new choral works are composed and when artists are paid to create work. So first of all, I was just really excited, fundamentally, that a new work was being created. And then as someone who's kind of active in and invested in this idea of community arts, I was excited that this project was being created and this effort was being made to partner with the Cambodian community. And I really felt that, Cambodian Living Arts and all the community partners were just really a model of how to create and dream up this kind of these hospitable, welcoming spaces for people to engage together. And like you said, art is so powerful. I think Sopheap said this as well, for sparking dialogue and sparking conversation. And I was really inspired by how ambitious this project was and how transnational it was from the start. So Cambodian Living Arts, it's not enough to do a piece in Cambodia. We have to have an international orchestra and a choir from Taiwan, and we're going to perform it all over the world. I mean, it's just incredibly ambitious. So just on that level, it's like, wow, it's really an amazing work. But then there's the other side of it, which, as everyone is saying, is the human side of it. And I just think, being a non-Cambodian and sharing in this kind of sacred space with everyone was profoundly humbling, first of all, because of this act of hospitality, the sense that the fact that the creators from the start said, this is everyone's story, this is a human story, is a profound act of hospitality. And I think we all, being in that space together, for those who weren't there, when you walk in, you're invited to put on a shroud, which symbolizes death. And at the end, you are asked to shed the shroud as that act of rebirth. And I think that it's a profoundly beautiful and profoundly optimistic piece that speaks to the potential of rebirth, while also inviting people, myself as an American, to come to terms, to confront this legacy of suffering that we've been responsible for in some way. And then in terms of connecting with audience members and hearing the reaction, I think again and again I heard from people kind of resonating with what everyone's saying, which is that it really caused people to ask questions. It sparked understanding across generations in powerful kinds of ways. And the sense of pride also. I remember being in a community event in Lowell at a middle school and just sitting in front of these middle school girls who were watching these musicians perform. And this little girl said, "I'm just so proud to be Cambodian. I'm just so proud of my culture." And that little moments like that were just incredibly powerful for me.
Yep. Did you find that this very unfamiliar genre of music being instrumental in evoking these experiences? Do you think that Cambodians in Phnom Penh, how do you believe that they received that? Were you able to talk to some people in Phnom Penh about what they thought about the Requiem as a genre and as this concert piece?
I would first start with my experience with the music, because I feel that this music is a part of us, and culturally, and I think it's part of us. I started to be familiar with the piece of the music in 2013 when Dr. Howe and Chea Sopheap started to compose, and he presented us a small fragment of the piece. And at that point, I feel that what's happening? And I wanted to leave the hall when hearing sort of story from the music. But something brought me back. I don't know, it's the kind of feeling brought me back into the hall, telling me that you have to learn it, you have to accept it. And I doubt all the time. And I asked Dr. Howe and Chea after the performance and after the piece in New York. And then I met him several times. I always tell him, what kind of music is it? I don't really understand, but I feel that I related to this music. One is that, you know, the sound of the, I don't know how to explain, but it's really my story. It really relates to me. And then I came to understand that it's a Bangsokol when Rati started to work on this project, putting image, oh, that is the story. So personally, it's related to me already as a younger generation. I feel that I'm part of it. I feel that the story described in the wave of that sounds is my story. But I did not talk too much to younger generation because after watching the show, everyone just, you know, keep calm. And I don't feel disturbing to talk, but I can feel how they feel. They must feel like me because we are all after, we were born after the Khmer Rouge, and we, you know, we feel related to that. So I cannot say on behalf of younger Cambodian who saw Bangsokol, but I say on my behalf that it's related to us.
Good to hear. Thanks, Sophia.
Thank you, Sophia. And what I think I heard is that the music became a vehicle for you. And that's really, really beautiful. So,
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
we talked about this idea of timelessness quite a lot in our conversation, that there's like this past, present, and future aspect. And this timelessness is reflected in a quote that I want to read to you all. In the words of Angelina Jolie, who actually saw this performance in New York City with her children. She said, it's like an hour-long prayer to pay respect, to remember, and to help us think of Cambodia in the past, the ancient past, the more recent past, the present, and into a more hopeful future. So I'd like to ask everybody here, in what ways do you believe Bangsokol and works like it can advance Cambodian arts and healing for a more hopeful future?
It would be hard for me because I've been through a lot through my life. It would be extremely hard for people who've never been through war to imagine that the arts, the culture of a whole nation existed 1,000 years ago, were completely abolished when Cambodia experienced political upheaval in the 1970s. Even the singers, the dancers were not spared. And every time I listened to Sansi Samot, Rusraisati, Pandron, my favorite singer, and I thought, these guys are amazing. How could those people, you know, torture them and executed these people? What did they do wrong? Every day they entertaining us, make us feel happy, you know, make our life a lot more meaningful after a very tiring day. You listen to the music, you feel calm, right? And these people are just comforting us, our souls, and they were killed. And I thought, in Cambodia, after all that, you know, the whole restoration of the nation, and not just arts, everything. You're looking at education side of it, you know, to rebuild the country. It was a tremendous job. And then to be able to come and tour the world, this is Bangsokol. To be, you know, educated to bring, to revive our arts and culture to this large scale and tour the whole world. Can you imagine how proud I was? I could not believe that, you know, the wounded nation like Cambodia torn by war, to come together with young people who've never been through war. All of us wouldn't be able to do it because we suffer so much. Only young people like you guys could put all this together. So I congratulate all those artists and also Dr. Howe and Chea and Panditi and all that to try and put a piece of Bangsokol, which is a fantastic performing art, and, you know, to come like to Paris, Melbourne, New York, you name it. You know, it's so much effort behind the whole things. All we could do was sit back and relax and enjoy the music. And then when it ended, I thought, oh, I wanted to see more. It shouldn't stop here. Just keep going. But it was the work that they, you know, created quite some times before they could put together and take the whole entourage around the world. So it's to me, it's amazing. Like I said, to try and find everyone who could actually put the story together and revive our arts and culture, which was completely, you know, abolished in the 1970s. How did they start from scratch? It's an amazing thing, and we've gone this far. All we have to do is keep doing it, and just you know, in the back of our mind, just look at war as it's the way to avoid and try to get together and look at peace instead of war. Perhaps love more and hate less. I know we can't eliminate hate. If I could, I would take that word away from our vocab, because it's a horrible word. So loving is a lot easier, but hate is a horrible thing to do from humankind.
Thank you so much, Seda. Yeah, that was such a wonderful answer to the question, because the mere existence of this piece is a sign of hope, of what the potential is for our generation that has come after you. And how powerful is that? So thank you so much. Ada, would you like to continue?
No worries.
I resonate with what's been said, but with such a production, when you see it firsthand, it's like this is your part of your story being told by your own people. And I think when it's told from that perspective, and you see the talent that came together to make it possible, and just like, you know, the caliber of such a production, it's like world class. You know, and you feel proud. You can say, like, you know, I'm Cambodian, and you can speak about these type of works and they exist. Whereas you can, like, you know, backtrack decades ago, it was hard to find much, because, you know, the world before the internet was like, you're limited to the library at best. And even with that, it's like very limited resources for my generation during that time. But now, being that, you know, we're much more connected, then you can see these type of work and have conversations, and they're like completely blown away. I think it resonates something like very, very bright and like hopeful, because now we have something to look forward to, and something to say, okay, like if you were a child looking at this production, or someone in your teens, you have something to aspire to, and it's an original piece of work. So I think that also speaks volumes with
Yes, the potential and what this piece demonstrates for what's also possible in other spaces, for sure. Sopheap, how do you see Bangsokol as advancing arts and healing?
As I say, Bangsokol is very, very special, and it's the first time for me to see such a special piece. I don't know how to describe, but Bangsokol is not about the performance itself, but it's something special in terms of the art promotion of Cambodia. You see that the Cambodian musical instruments are arranged there, and again, this Bangsokol is about Cambodian arts. It's about Cambodian cultures, but it's about unifying Cambodian people, because from the context they learn from the story. And I think that Bangsokol tells them this is time to be together, to build their nation, to build their identity, their country. So I would echo what Anje naturally said. I really like the quote she made.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the spiritual collective aspect of this project really speaks to me as well. So thank you. And Emily, what do you have to say about Bangsokol helping to advance Cambodian arts and healing?
Well, I think about the last movement of the work, which is this Chayam performance where the two singers, Savi and Samat, teach young children these movements and the rhythms of the song, of the dance. To me, that really symbolizes the power of this piece to transmit to the next generation, and spark curiosity, but also spark innovation. And I had the privilege of seeing that in Phnom Penh, working with these 12 and 13-year-old singers who were involved in the performance. And I just see, limitless potential in them. And I see that reflected in the work as well. So it's powerful, it's beautiful, it's inspiring.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, the scale of the collaboration for me as well was something that was to behold. And I think that grief finds relief in the actual act of sharing it. So sharing the experience of Bangsokol really helps us to sort of rectify and reconcile such a heavy past, as well as, what's happening right now in 2020 during the COVID era. This is something that that I think is even current to us. I feel like, the spirits of the past is giving us a message of like resilience and of healing. So, I believe that at the core of art lies its ability to humanize and to transcend and to heal. And Bangsokol is such an exquisite example of this. So I'd like to end on that note. And I just want to extend all of my gratitude to each one of you for your sincerity, for your time, for opening up and sharing this moment with you. It was really such a privilege for me. I hope that we can all keep in touch and continue the conversation. And I want to extend a thank you to especially Cambodian Living Arts and Jean-Baptiste and Pluin for allowing me the opportunity to participate. Arts and Healing Bangsokol Virtual Festival continues, and the next session is going to be focused on development of the production from an institutional point of view. So who are the different partners that, that make this international collaboration possible? So to view the next session, please go to bangsokol.cambodianlivingarts.org to view the event as well as the final festival program. So also you can get involved by sharing on Instagram or on Facebook an image or video that tells us a little bit about arts and healing for you in 2020. And please don't forget the hashtag ArtsHealing2020. Thank you so much for joining us today.